Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're exploring the life of John Nash, the brilliant mathematician you might know from the movie A Beautiful Mind.
Yeah, Beautiful Mind.
Such a great film.
Great film.
Nash, he was a remarkable guy, groundbreaking work in game theory economics, all while struggling with schizophrenia.
Right.
Now, you sent over some really interesting research about Nash and the Enneagram,
Yes.
specifically the self-preservation subtype of type 6.
Huh?
So that's what we are going to dive into today, using the Enneagram to understand this specific subtype through Nash's life.
It's fascinating how his story, really shows us the complexities of the mind. Like, we often think of genius as this almost otherworldly trait.
Right.
But Nash shows us how even these brilliant minds, they're still driven by basic human needs.
Like the need for security.
Exactly. And that's central to the self-preservation 6.
Okay, so for those of us who aren't total Enneagram experts, could you break down what exactly defines a self-preservation 6?
Imagine feeling like the world is just this precarious place,
Oh, yeah.
full of hidden dangers.
I can see that.
So this anxiety, it drives the self-preservation 6 to seek security above everything else.
Makes sense.
They build this fortress of safety through close relationships, and they often present themselves as non-threatening, almost harmless, to avoid attracting any danger.
So it's like a survival strategy.
Exactly, a deeply ingrained survival strategy.
But wasn't Nash known for being intensely ambitious, especially when he was younger? Like, I read about his arrogance and competitiveness, so how does that fit with being a self-preservation 6, someone who wants to kind of fly under the radar?
That's a really great point.
Yeah.
It's true, he was very bright, very ambitious early on,
Uh,
but as his life went on, especially as he dealt with schizophrenia, his approach changed.
how so?
He became more reliant on others, more willing to show vulnerability,
Interesting.
which really aligns with this idea of playing harmless
Saying harmless.
that Naranja describes. It's like he instinctively understood that to navigate this world that felt increasingly chaotic, he needed to build a really strong support system.
It's so interesting how even these brilliant minds are grappling with these very human needs.
Yeah.
We're seeing that security is huge for the self-preservation 6. So where do we see that playing out specifically in Nash's life?
Well, his relationship with his wife, Alicia, is a perfect example.
Oh, yeah.
They clearly had a deep love, but it went beyond romance.
I see.
Alicia became his anchor to reality, his source of stability as he went through his illness.
It's like that saying, a little warmth.
Exactly. Naranjo talks about this idea that the self-preservation 6 seeks a little warmth, this sense of safety and belonging that's deeper than just surface-level connection.
Right.
And for Nash Alicia, along with his close network, they provided that warmth.
That scene in the movie where he's having those intense paranoid delusions.
Oh, yeah.
And it's Alicia who brings him back.
Powerful scene.
It always stuck with me.
Such a powerful illustration
Yeah.
of how important she was to his well-being.
Yeah.
She wasn't just a loving wife. She was his lifeline to a world that often felt terrifying and unpredictable.
It's like she provided the grounding he needed.
Exactly, grounding to exist without being totally overwhelmed by his anxieties.
It really challenges that stereotype of the solitary genius.
Yes.
You know, we see this brilliant mind accomplishing all these amazing things,
Right.
but his foundation, his ability to really thrive it, was built on this profound need for connection and security.
Absolutely, and that need was met through his relationships.
It really underscores how interconnected we all are.
Yeah.
I mean, even someone as extraordinary as John Nash with all his gifts, he was still deeply reliant on human connection for his well-being.
We all are in some way.
So we see how crucial Alicia was in giving him that security.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other examples of how he embodied this playing harmless strategy that we see in the self-preservation 6?
Yes, definitely his later years at Princeton are really illuminating. He transitioned from that ambitious, somewhat arrogant young scholar to this almost mythical figure, the harmless eccentric.
Interesting.
Wandering the halls, lost in thought, seemingly detached from the world.
Yeah,
But he wasn't ostracized or ridiculed.
right.
Instead, the Princeton community embraced him, protected him, almost revered him.
It's like they created that small, warm world that Naranjo talks about.
Exactly. A safe haven for someone they cared for.
It's a far cry from that cutthroat world of academia we always hear about.
It really is.
It says a lot about the self-preservation 6's drive to create these protective environments.
Yes, they're always seeking security through these close-knit communities where they feel that sense of belonging and safety.
And it's fascinating how in Nash's case, his colleagues who were initially competitors became part of his fortress.
It's true. It's a powerful example of how relationships can evolve.
This is all starting to make sense, but we haven't talked about his schizophrenia yet.
Right.
How does his mental illness fit into this understanding of him as a self-preservation six?
It's crucial to remember that schizophrenia is a distinct clinical condition.
Of course.
But what's fascinating is how Nash's delusions, even in the most disturbing forms, they reflect these core anxieties of a self-preservation six. It's like even when his mind was playing tricks on him, those deeply rooted anxieties were still driving his actions.
Yeah, so even when his mind was kind of,
Distorted. Those core motivations were still shining through.
So his paranoia wasn't about power or domination like you might see with some other types.
Exactly. It wasn't about controlling others. His delusions were all about protecting himself and his loved ones.
Wow.
Seeing codes to decipher conspiracies, to uncover, all to keep the people he cared about safe.
That's really poignant.
It really is.
So how did he cope with those delusions? I mean, they sound terrifying.
Well, that's where it gets even more interesting. He didn't approach them with aggression or try to suppress them with rigid rules or systems.
Okay.
He learned to coexist with them, which is very characteristic of a self-preservation sex.
That's surprising. I would imagine someone with his intellect trying to outsmart his delusions, using logic to fight them.
It might seem counterintuitive, but remember, for a self-preservation, six security is everything.
Right.
And for Nash, that security came from the fortress he had built, his network of relationships.
I see.
He allowed himself to be vulnerable, relying on Alicia and others to help him navigate that confusing world of his delusions.
So he surrendered to the care of others.
In a way, yes. And it's amazing when you think about it.
With a mind capable of such incredible insights.
Right. It's a beautiful paradox.
It really is.
Remember his famous quote about choosing to live with his delusions rather than trying to rationalize them away?
Yeah.
Such a powerful statement about acceptance, finding ways to live with what we can't control.
It really challenges that stereotype of the stoic genius battling their demons alone.
Absolutely. It humanizes him.
Yeah.
Shows the strength that can come from vulnerability and connection.
It really does.
Now, Naranjo also wrote about self-preservation sixes forming these protective alliances. He called them neurotic friendships. Did you find any evidence of that dynamic in Nash's life?
Well, now that you mention it, his relationship with the Princeton community really stands out.
Yeah.
They created this safe haven for him.
Precisely. It wasn't necessarily about deep personal intimacy.
Right.
More of a shared understanding of mutual protection.
Like an unspoken pact.
Exactly. I won't hurt you, you won't hurt me. Creating a bubble of safety in a world that can feel threatening.
And we see this in how his colleagues, who were initially rivals, ended up becoming his protectors.
Yes, such a powerful example of how these relationships can evolve.
It's like they instinctively understood his need for that safe environment.
It's remarkable, and it highlights something really important about the Enneagram.
What's that?
It's not just about categorizing people. It's about understanding how different types navigate the world, what their needs are, and how we can support them.
That's a good point.
We can all learn from each other.
So we've talked about his relationships, his need for security, but did you find any evidence of this self-preservation six pattern in his approach to mathematics?
Oh, absolutely. His mathematical journey offers some fascinating insights.
Like what?
Well, early on, his work was all about this aggressive problem-solving, tackling huge unsolved problems.
Yeah, he wanted to conquer math with his intellect.
Exactly. But as we've seen, his approach to life shifted over time.
So did that affect his work as well?
It did as he matured and faced his illness. His focus shifted from conquering problems to finding patterns and creating order in the world of mathematics.
So instead of imposing his will on the world of numbers, he was seeking to understand it, to find meaning and structure within it.
Exactly. It's like he was using math to create a sense of safety and predictability.
In a world that felt chaotic.
Yes. For Nash, finding those patterns, creating order in complex systems, it might have been a way to soothe his anxieties.
It makes you think about how we all seek comfort and stability in different ways.
It's true. Some people find it through routines or rituals, others through intellectual pursuits like mathematics.
I wonder if that's something we see with other self-preservation sixes.
That's a great question. The need for security might manifest differently, but the underlying motivation is the same.
To create order and stability.
Right. In a world that can feel unpredictable. And this highlights how different Enneagram types might approach the same thing in completely different ways.
Give me an example.
Imagine a social six, someone who finds security in belonging to a group.
Okay.
They might see mathematics as a set of rules to be followed, a way to create societal order. But for Nash, a self-preservation Dawser 6, it seems to have been more personal, more about finding inner peace within the structure of numbers.
So he found a haven in the world of mathematics, a place where he could escape his anxieties.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And his relationship with authority is another area where his self-preservation 6 tendencies are really apparent.
How did he navigate those authority figures?
Well, he didn't conform to authority like a social 6 might, nor did he challenge it head-on like a sexual 6.
Interesting.
He became that harmless eccentric Naranjo talks about,
I see.
existing outside the usual power structures, but not posing a threat.
Like a beloved oddity.
Exactly. And authority figures felt compelled to protect him.
It's like he transcended those power dynamics just by being himself.
He carved out his own space, his own way of being, and it disarmed those who might have tried to control him.
It's another self-preservation 6 strategy.
Exactly. Disarm potential threats by not appearing, threatening, eliciting care and protection from those in power.
It's a subtle approach, but effective.
Very effective.
It's not just about avoiding conflict. It's about finding a way to exist comfortably within a system that might otherwise feel overwhelming.
Right. Finding your niche.
And vulnerability seems to have played a big role in that. For Nash, he didn't try to hide his struggles, did he?
You're right. He was remarkably open about his challenges, especially later in life. And that's what makes his story so profound. Yeah. He goes against that stereotype of the stoic genius, the idea that brilliant minds are supposed to be invulnerable.
It's a good reminder that even the most accomplished people have their struggles.
Everyone struggles in some way.
Yeah.
And his willingness to be vulnerable, to let people see his struggles, that actually became a source of strength for him.
How so?
It allowed him to connect more deeply and receive the support he needed to navigate those challenges.
It's like he was saying, I'm not perfect, I struggle, but I need you.
Yes.
Oh.
And that vulnerability, that willingness to reach out for connection, it aligns perfectly with what Naranjo observed about self-preservation 6s.
Yeah.
They use vulnerability to build those essential bonds of trust and support, reinforcing their fortress of security.
It's like a counterintuitive strength.
Exactly. Strength nonetheless.
Yeah. It's amazing how something we often see as a weakness, vulnerability can actually be a path to strength and connection.
It's a powerful lesson for sure. And Nash's story really shows us that. It makes you think, if someone as brilliant and troubled as John Nash could find peace and stability through connection and vulnerability, what's possible for the rest of us?
That's a great question to think about. We've only just scratched the surface, but what stands out to you as the biggest takeaway from our deep dive into John Nash and the self-preservation 6?
I think for me, it's this reminder that even the most extraordinary people are driven by these basic human needs.
Yeah.
We tend to put geniuses on a pedestal like they're separate from the rest of us.
Right.
But Nash's story, it humanizes genius. It
Yeah.
shows us that even these brilliant minds, they still struggle with fear, insecurity, the need for connection.
It reminds us that those needs, those anxieties, they're part of what makes us human.
Exactly. Regardless of our intellect or accomplishments.
And there's something hopeful about that.
Yeah, definitely.
It suggests that we all have this capacity to connect, to build relationships, to create a sense of safety and belonging.
We all need that sense of belonging.
And it's especially powerful in a world that can feel so isolating and uncertain.
Yeah, the world can feel pretty chaotic sometimes.
Knowing that even someone like John Nash found solace and connection, well, it gives me hope.
Me too. And understanding these personality patterns like the Enneagram, it can be such a valuable tool for self-awareness.
Right. It's not about putting people into boxes.
Exactly.
It's about understanding the different ways we experience the world,
Yeah, how we approach things.
our needs, how we can better support each other.
Recognizing that our differences are not something to fear,
Yeah.
but something to understand and embrace.
Beautifully said. And who knows, maybe by understanding these dynamics, we can create a world where more people feel safe enough to be themselves.
I love that idea, a world where everyone feels safe to be vulnerable.
Vulnerability is an all-knowing that they'll be met with compassion.
That's a beautiful vision.
Well, on that hopeful note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the world of John Nash and the self-preservation 6.
Yes. Thank you to you, our listener, for sharing this fascinating research with us.
Yeah, this has been a really thought-provoking conversation.
It really has.
And we encourage you to keep exploring the Enneagram.
Keep learning.
See how understanding your own personality patterns might help you face your fears, build stronger relationships, and live a more fulfilling life.
because self-discovery is a journey.
A lifelong journey, and you might even discover a little bit of John Nash's brilliance within yourself.
That spark of genius we all have.
Just waiting to be ignited by connection and the courage to embrace our true selves. Until next time, keep diving deep.